Epaphroditus was twisting Epictetus's leg, not to punish him, to see how long it would take. Epictetus looked up, calm, and said, "You're going to break it." It broke. "Didn't I tell you?" Around 50 AD, in Hierapolis, a Greek-speaking city in what is now Western Turkey, a slave woman gave birth to a son. He had no legal name of his own at birth. The name we know him by, Epictetus, is a Greek word meaning acquired, owned, something that belongs to someone else. He was taken to Rome as a boy. His owner, Epaphroditus, was a freedman who had purchased his own liberty under the Emperor Nero and then risen to become one of Nero's personal secretaries. Epaphroditus had proximity to the palace, considerable wealth, and a household of enslaved workers who performed what he required. Epictetus received through Epaphroditus's household access to a Stoic teacher, Musonius Rufus, the most respected philosopher working in Rome at the time. Musonius believed philosophy should be practiced, not debated, and he accepted students regardless of legal status. He taught discipline, not comfort. The broken leg story reaches us through the writer Celsus, quoted by the Christian theologian Origen in Contra Celsum 753, written around 248 AD. The account: Epaphroditus was twisting Epictetus's leg, testing him, demonstrating power, showing what property could be made to endure. Epictetus watched this happen and said, without heat, that the leg would break. When it broke, he noted only that he'd said it would. The injury left him lame for the rest of his life. Rome had laws governing what a slave could own, where he could go, who could hear him speak. It had no law for what Epictetus had just done. Because what he'd done wasn't patience, and it wasn't performance. He'd found something inside himself that Epaphroditus hadn't known to claim. Epictetus was eventually freed. The exact date is uncertain, but probably after Nero's death in 68 AD scattered the freedman's network. He settled in Rome and began teaching. In the late 80s AD, the Emperor Domitian expelled all philosophers from the city. Epictetus moved to Nicopolis, a port town in northwestern Greece. He opened a school there. Students came from across the empire, Roman senators, knights, sons of wealthy families, who had every legal privilege Epictetus had been denied his entire life. They came to learn from a man who had been property. What he taught begins with something that sounds almost too simple to matter. Some things are in our power, others are not. Opinion, desire, aversion, these belong to you. Body, reputation, circumstances, these don't. Act accordingly. We tend to read that as a philosophy of acceptance, a way of making peace with what you can't change. Comfort for the powerless, the framework that tells the enslaved not to fight, to be grateful for what remains. It isn't. It's something much harder to argue against, and much more dangerous to anyone who depends on controlling you. Every coercive relationship runs on one assumption, that the person being coerced cares what happens to their body, their reputation, or their standing. Epaphroditus's power over Epictetus required Epictetus to believe a broken leg was the worst possible outcome. The moment Epictetus placed his freedom inside his own capacity to judge, rather than inside his circumstances, the leverage collapsed. Lock the door. Epictetus still decides what being locked in means. Assign the labor. He decides whether the assignment defines him. Twist the leg. He notes, clinically, that you're going to break it. This is what Arrian, one of those Roman students, copied down from the lectures in Nicopolis.
Of things, some are in our power and others are not. In our power are opinion, movement towards a thing, desire, aversion, turning from a thing. And in a word, whatever are our own acts, not in our power are the body, reputation, offices, magisterial power. And in a word, whatever are not our own acts, and the things in our power are by nature free, not subject to restraint nor hindrance. But the things not in our power are weak, slavish, subject to restraint in the power of others.
Epictetus. Read that last clause knowing who wrote it. The things not in our power are weak, slavish. A man who spent years as someone's legal property, calling the body the slavish thing, the object subject to others' power, he'd inverted the entire taxonomy of Roman law. The senators who came to Nicopolis weren't there for comfort. They came because what Epictetus had built inside a life that had owned nothing was the only philosophy they'd seen that couldn't be confiscated. Arrian was direct in his preface to the discourses. These weren't polished essays. They were lecture notes, rough, live, and anything in them that had the force of the real thing was the teacher's work, not the scribe's. He also compiled a short handbook, which he named the Enchiridion, meaning held in the hand, a manual for daily use. 3 ideas run through every page. The first is the sovereignty of will, not the body, not reputation, not what others think of you or what position you hold. The Greek term Epictetus used was prohieris, the faculty of deliberate choice, the capacity to assent or withhold assent from any impression. This is the one thing that belongs to you completely. Damage it by consenting to things beneath you, and you've harmed yourself more than any chain could. The second is character under conditions. Epictetus taught that your roles as a student, a teacher, a citizen, carry obligations that don't dissolve because circumstances are hard. He'd kept being a student when he was owned. He kept teaching when Domitian expelled him from Rome. The role doesn't wait for favorable conditions. The third is the freedom of assent. No external force can compel your judgment. An authority can control your body, your schedule, your access to resources. He can't make you agree that any of it means what he needs it to mean for his control to function. This is where the leg story stops being an anecdote and becomes a proof. Epictetus didn't endure Epaphroditus through gritted teeth and private resentment. The whole point is that the pain didn't produce the response Epaphroditus was counting on. That response would have been the lever. Without it, there was no machine.
Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. For example, death is nothing terrible, for if it were, it would have seemed so to Socrates. For the opinion about death, that it is terrible, is the terrible thing. When then we are impeded or disturbed or grieved, let us never blame others but ourselves, that is, our opinions.
Epictetus. Socrates chose hemlock rather than exile because exile would have required him to betray his function. Epictetus's master chose to break the leg because he thought that's how you demonstrated ownership. Both of them were arguing about something Epictetus had already placed somewhere else entirely. Epictetus was freed. He outlived Nero. He outlived Epaphroditus, who was executed by Domitian for helping Nero end his own life. He survived his own banishment, and he never once petitioned for his manumission, because the thing he'd protected most carefully was already free. The uncomfortable part of Epictetus's framework isn't the difficulty of the philosophy. It's the demand it places on you once you've accepted it. If you know that opinion is in your power, but you still catastrophize a performance review, you've handed someone else control over something that was yours. If you understand that reputation isn't in your power, but you spend hours calculating what someone thinks of you, you've built your own prison and given someone else the key. Scenario 1. You're in a job where the leadership is arbitrary, the feedback is political, and leaving isn't an option tomorrow. Epictetus's answer isn't, "It doesn't matter." It's this: you decide what that review means, not your manager. You decide whether this person's assessment of your output becomes your assessment of your own worth. They have authority over the paycheck. They don't have authority over that. Scenario 2. You're in a relationship, family, long professional history, a partnership where someone uses your need for their approval as a tool. It works because you've allowed it to work. Epictetus isn't telling you to stop caring about people. He's telling you to care from self-command rather than self-surrender. The difference is whether you're choosing to give or being made to pay. The status move here isn't indifference, it's mastery. The person who can't be shamed into compliance, who can't be pressured through fear of exclusion, who responds to a broken leg with a calm statement of fact, that person has no lever point. Every experienced coercer knows this. It's why they stop trying. Epictetus had his leg broken. He had no property, no legal standing, no documented history that would survive without a student willing to write it down. And in the sense that held up across 2,000 years, he was untouchable. The dichotomy of control isn't a theory about what to tolerate. It's a practice for locating the part of you that can't be seized and choosing every day to operate from there rather than from the part that can. Epictetus didn't write a single word himself. What survived came from a student who sat in a room in Nicopolis and wrote down what the teacher said. It survived Nero. It survived Domitian. It survived 17 centuries of people who assumed it was a philosophy for the defeated. It wasn't built for the defeated. It was built for people who'd understood what they were actually protecting. If this episode landed for you, subscribe. We're working through the Stoics who faced Rome at its worst, and the next one goes deeper into the same territory. One question before you close this. What's the one area of your life where you keep handing someone else control over something that's actually yours? And what would it look like to stop?